Well, finally, Dfinity, they've done it yet again. They've secured another partnership, and it's actually with the United Nations Development Program. I am not joking. That's what's literally on the screen, right? And when we take a look at this, especially at a time like right now, with the computer being at below $3, could you imagine how mesmerizing a partnership like this is? Again, with the United Nations Development Program. Let me talk all about this in today's video, even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything. It's just my personal perspective, and nothing I say is financial advice. So people may be saying, first of all, wait, hold up. Hasn't Dfinity done something alongside the United Nations Development Program in the past? True, yes. So they've actually been a partner, or sponsor, I should say, partner/sponsor of the United Nations Development Program AltFin Lab, which I've already made a video on, which was quite detailed. But regardless, they've done that. But what was missing is an actual, literal, full-on partnership with the United Nations Development Program, which a lot of people were unsure if they could ever even do. Because a lot of people thought, it's just a gimmick and all this when it comes to Dfinity, they don't care. But having a full-on partnership of this magnitude, could you imagine? This is quite legendary. Keep in mind, right? This partnership is actually going to make a great use out of the computer, arguably, in my opinion, and also some of the core products of Dfinity, because this, again, is framed as a new partnership between Dfinity and the United Nations Development Program. Now, it was signed specifically to bring sovereign cloud and agentic AI to public services. So we got to let that sink in. The reach of the United Nations Development Program is really massive, right? The computer is still kind of a niche project within this space, arguably. So of course, this is going to greatly help and further expand the reach of Dfinity and the computer. Now, over the next 12 months, this involves piloting the technology in United Nations Development Program offices, which, there are a lot of them worldwide. And then also on top of that, there's going to be an aspect of co-designing pilots. And furthermore, it centers on cloud engines, so that's pretty impressive. And the support for custom apps, right? Using various AI tools such as Caffeine AI. And also even Claude and all this. But I'm just saying, or should I say Claude Code? But yeah, besides that point, when it comes to Dfinity, they're doing massive things as of late. This is quite legendary. This is going to not only help, increase the presence of Dfinity, but also on the flip side, help showcase how the computer is indeed something that could be used for the case of AI. So we gotta let this sink in. So when people told me that cloud engines is going to be useless, when people told me that the upcoming software as a service, aspect when it comes to this is going to be useless, when they said that, no one's going to care about Caffeine AI, well, take a look at all those aspects I mentioned before, and all those aspects have something to do with this recent partnership with the United Nations Development Program. So it's not like what Dfinity was doing was useless. No, it wasn't. I don't think it was at all. I think it was actually quite useful in that sense, right? So when people like to tell me that Dfinity has been doing nothing behind the scenes, I disagree with that. Keep in mind, Dfinity spent roughly $500 million so far. I'm not joking. That's roughly around $500 million, right? They've spent that much so far, at least the last time I checked, on research and development. So when people were telling me, like, wow, that's such a waste, why didn't they just buy a building and rent it out? A lot of people were wondering why they didn't just do that. But now, as time went on, it's becoming a little bit more clear that actually, they're spending it for an actual goal and purpose. It's not just useless. Keep in mind, I get the argument when people like to say, well, why didn't Dfinity just buy a random building, rent it out, and then use the revenue or whatever, and then use that to reacquire some of the internet computer in terms of the token, right? Some people have been wondering why they didn't just do that. But personally, for me, that's a very short-term mindset, because if Dfinity's goal and intent is to actually improve the project, then buying a building and using the revenue for nonsense like that is not really going to matter too much over the long haul, because that's not going to improve anything fundamentally. But, stuff like this is, right? Having a partnership with the United Nations Development Program and whatnot, that is what is going to help improve the fundamentals and the future presence of Dfinity. If, let's say, their computer was a meme, then I understand why they might use, some of the capital to buy a random building, call it like a meme tower or whatever, and then use like the revenue to reacquire whatever supply that's existing. Like let's say they reacquire some of the tokens or whatever, then yeah, I get why a meme would do that, but this is not a meme. They don't need to do stuff like that. So when I take a look at this is quite legendary in my opinion, because this is going to make a great use of not only the core products of Dfinity, arguably, but also on top of that, help again increase its notoriety within the space of AI, which also inherently, this is going to go on the hypothetical resume when it comes to Dfinity in a sense, right? Because imagine now Dfinity, this could act as a catalyst for them, because if they meet with an enterprise, they meet with an organization, they can say, hey, we've done this in the past. Take a look at what we've done with the United Nations Development Program, right? That could, be said during a meeting, during talks, during discussions. This is all the type of stuff that's going to be taken into consideration maybe later on by some massive enterprises out there. Because it's like, for instance, when someone applies for a job and they put something on their resume, the hypothetical maybe future employer is going to take a look at that, and maybe they're going to say, oh wow, I can't believe the person did this before, done that before. Wow, that's so impressive, right? So it's kind of no different here. Now, yes, I get it. Their computer actually, if anything, went down in the past 24 hours of around 1%. I'm totally aware of that. So people like to say, that means this partnership doesn't matter. Well, I think it's quite the opposite. This partnership, I think, matters a lot, but it's not really affecting the price charts. Why? Well, it's because the market's been having a slight pullback as of late. But this doesn't necessarily concern me, because my mindset is for the long haul, right? It's for the long term. And partnerships like this are usually what is going to allow a project to survive for the long haul. So this is actually fitting in line with what I'm looking for. I'm looking for projects that have a long-term mindset, because I have a long-term mindset. So again, this is something that's very impressive. The Earn Computer is still below $3, but that does not mean that the partnership was a flop. No, if anything, it's going to actually help greatly improve the Earn Computer. But again, the price charts is affected by the market sentiment overall. It's not affected by the partnerships or by the, updates or whatever, at least in the short term. Again, that type of stuff isn't going to affect much when it comes to the price charts, especially if the market isn't doing the best. But need I remind people, their computer recovered around almost 10% in the past 7 days. So yes, with the announcement of this update in regard to their partnership, I get how it's went down. But on the flip side, we have to take into consideration the market overall still isn't doing the best. And usually if the market were to recover, people take a look at this type of stuff anyways. People take a look back at stuff like this. And not to mention, the Earn Computer was at around $9 back in November of last year without this partnership even being in existence. So imagine if the market sentiment were to go back to where it once was last year or even the year before. Could you imagine? The Earn Computer was able to reach around $20 back in 2024 without this partnership. It was able to reach around $9 just back in November without this partnership. So when people like to say it's impossible for the Earn Computer to go back to around $9 or $20, well, my kind of, response is, well, why? Like, why not, I suppose? Not saying that it hypothetically will, because we don't know for sure as of right now, but I'm just saying, why not, right? It's been able to reach that before without the partnerships that we see as of right now. So if anything, if it had an easier journey back there, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. And that's, of course, contingent on if the market could recover, but that's a big if. But nonetheless, Dfinity recently announcing a partnership with the United Nations Development Program that is so massive in my opinion. Yes, I get it. Their computer is still over 3 times away than $9. It's still almost 10 times away than $20, which we saw back in 2024. But I think fundamentally it's improved by a whole lot, and these fundamental improvements is what is usually going to matter if the market really were to recover. And I think it's also going to allow for it to survive over the long haul, just because usually if something is useful, it doesn't go out of style that quickly, right? It's like, for instance, do we see Home Depot, Walmart, or Ace Hardware go out of style? Not necessarily, because it's actually useful. There's actually a use case there, right? What went out of style though? Nokia, and as well as Blockbuster. You know what I mean? Some other projects out there don't improve, they don't want to do anything, and they go out of style. They're in computer through Dfinity, and Dfinity, is doing things very hard for something with a good use case to go out of style. So when people like to say, well, the computer is going to get forgotten about if the market were to recover. Well, if it has amazing partnerships and if it has a good use case, it's sometimes pretty tough to get forgotten about. That's just what I realized. But I digress. As of right now, I'm just still waiting and holding, even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything. But seeing that recent partnership, it's kind of like, wow, finally. That was my reaction. This is kind of like a moment to showcase that Dfinity, when it comes to cloud engines, when it comes to Caffeine AI, when it comes to the open software as a service suite, all that type of stuff right there doesn't necessarily seem as useless now with this recent partnership. And this is just kind of the start, right? As time goes on, if Dfinity has more and more partnerships, that could really help increase its presence, not only in the case of AI, but also just when it comes to this space overall, which I don't think is a bad thing. However, I'll be sure to make more updates moving forward when it comes to this, and hopefully I'll see y'all on the next one. I want to say thank you so much for watching.